Most people assume their thoughts represent their true selves. You think what you think, you want what you want, and that's simply who you are. But Carl Jung made a crucial distinction that changes everything. The ego is not the whole psyche. In fact, much of what you experience as internal conflict, the part of you that wants safety battling, the part that wants meaning, the part seeking approval, fighting the part demanding authenticity, isn't confusion or dysfunction. It's evidence of something profound happening within you. It's the ego and the self engaged in the fundamental struggle that defines psychological and spiritual development. And understanding this battle, really understanding the mechanics of it, can transform how you experience your own inner life, your choices, your relationships, and your spiritual journey. If you're interested in understanding the deeper architecture of consciousness and the real sources of inner conflict, subscribe to Empire of the Mind. We explore the psychology of transformation with depth and clarity. Hit that subscribe button and join us in this exploration. 1. The fundamental distinction: ego versus self. Let's start with Jung's fundamental distinction, because this is the foundation of everything that follows. The ego is the center of consciousness. It's the I you identify with, the part of you that makes decisions, maintains continuity of identity, navigates the social world, and creates your sense of being a separate, coherent individual. The ego is essential. Without it, you'd have no stable sense of self, no ability to function in the world, no capacity to make choices or maintain boundaries. But, and this is crucial, the ego is not the totality of who you are. The self, in Jung's model, is the totality. It's the whole psyche, conscious and unconscious, known and unknown, developed and potential. It's the organizing center of the entire personality, the archetype of wholeness itself. The ego is like the captain of a ship. The self is the entire vessel, the ocean it travels, the destination it's moving toward, and the force that propels the journey. Now here's where the tension emerges. The ego seeks control. It wants to maintain stability, predictability, and certainty. It wants to know who you are, what's safe, what's acceptable, and what maintains your current identity and social position. The self seeks wholeness. It wants integration, bringing all parts of you, including the rejected and unconscious parts, into conscious relationship. Even if that integration disrupts comfort, even if it threatens the ego's carefully constructed identity, the ego wants certainty, validation, and stability. It asks, am I safe? Am I approved of? Am I in control? The self wants integration, even if it requires uncertainty, disapproval, and the surrender of control. It asks, am I whole? Am I authentic? Am I aligned with my deeper nature? And this fundamental difference in agenda creates the tension you feel inside. Part of you wants safety. Another part wants meaning. Part of you wants approval. Another part wants authenticity. Part of you wants to maintain the status quo. Another part knows something needs to change. This isn't dysfunction. This isn't you being confused or broken. This tension is individuation unfolding, the process by which you become psychologically whole. 2. Why the ego resists growth. So why does this feel like a battle? Why does growth often feel like you're fighting yourself? Because the ego fears loss of identity. When growth requires change, when individuation demands that you evolve beyond who you've been, the ego experiences this as a threat. Think about it. The ego's primary job is to maintain a stable sense of self, to know who you are, what you believe, how you fit in the world. It's built an entire structure around your current identity. So when the self introduces the need for change, when your soul whispers that this relationship isn't right anymore, that this career doesn't fit who you're becoming, that this belief system no longer contains your experience, the ego panics. Because change means death, not literal death, but the death of the identity the ego has been maintaining. And to the ego, its identity is survival. So the ego clings to familiar patterns, even unhealthy ones, even destructive ones. This is why people repeat destructive relationships. They know the relationship is harmful, but the pattern is familiar. The ego prefers the devil it knows. This is why people stay in unfulfilling roles, careers that drain them, social positions that require constant performance, religious frameworks that no longer fit, because leaving would require becoming someone new, and the ego experiences that as annihilation. This is why people resist necessary confrontation. Setting boundaries, speaking truth, claiming their needs. These actions might disrupt relationships the ego depends on for its sense of identity and safety. Jung put it perfectly. The ego prefers predictable pain over uncertain transformation. Better to stay in the known suffering than risk the unknown possibility. Better to remain small and safe than grow and face the terror of becoming someone you don't yet know. But the self, your deeper nature, your soul, your totality disrupts this stagnation. It introduces dissatisfaction, restlessness, a sense that something is wrong even when everything looks right on paper. It sends dreams that challenge your current life, symptoms that won't respond to surface solutions, longings that won't be silenced by ego's reassurances. 3. The cost of ignoring the soul. Jung believed that ignoring this deeper call, refusing the soul's demand for wholeness, leads to neurosis. And this is a crucial insight that gets lost in our culture's approach to mental health. The soul does not disappear when ignored. It doesn't go quietly. It creates symptoms. Anxiety that won't resolve through rational reassurance. Depression that persists despite circumstances being fine. Chronic dissatisfaction that can't be fixed by changing external conditions. These are not always pathological in the medical sense. Sometimes they are signals. They're the psyche's way of saying, you're living out of alignment with your deeper nature. You're maintaining an identity that no longer fits. You're ignoring aspects of yourself that need integration. Think about the person who has everything society says should make them happy. A successful career, a stable relationship, financial security, but feels empty. The ego has achieved everything it wanted, but the self remains unfulfilled. Or the person who's been the good child, the responsible one, the spiritual person for so long that they've lost touch with their authentic desires, their real anger, their genuine complexity. The ego is performing beautifully, but the soul is starving. Jung would say these symptoms, the anxiety, the depression, the restlessness, are not the problem. They're the solution trying to happen. They're the self's way of disrupting the ego's false stability, creating enough discomfort to force growth, demanding attention to what's been ignored. The ego says, maintain the image, keep performing, don't rock the boat. The self says, become real, integrate your shadow, stop performing, and start being. And when the ego refuses to listen, when it doubles down on control and image maintenance, the symptoms intensify. The soul turns up the volume. 4. The difference in orientation, comparison versus integration. Another crucial difference between ego and self is their fundamental orientation to life. The ego compares. The self integrates. The ego is constantly measuring. Am I better than them? Am I as successful? Am I as spiritual? Am I ahead or behind? Am I winning or losing? Its orientation is always external, always relative. How do I look? What will people think? Am I approved of? Do I measure up? The self has a completely different orientation. It asks, am I aligned with my deeper nature? Am I integrated? Am I whole? Am I living authentically? These questions have nothing to do with comparison. You can be aligned while others judge you. You can be integrated while appearing unsuccessful by external standards. You can be whole while falling short of the ego's image. This difference shows up powerfully in spirituality. When the ego dominates spirituality, faith becomes performance. It's about looking spiritual, being seen as evolved, collecting spiritual achievements, and maintaining a holy image. The ego asks, am I more enlightened than others? Do people see me as spiritual? Can I claim special spiritual status? When the self guides spirituality, faith becomes transformation. It's about actual growth, real integration, honest self-examination, and genuine encounter with the divine. The self asks, am I becoming more whole? Am I integrating my shadow? Am I growing in consciousness and compassion? Jung warned specifically about ego inflation in spiritual contexts, when the ego identifies with spiritual insight instead of being humbled by it. Instead of surrendering to the self, instead of recognizing that genuine spiritual experience should make you smaller and more humble, the ego claims ownership. It says, I am enlightened, I have special knowledge, I am chosen. This produces spiritual pride, one of the most dangerous forms of ego inflation, because it masquerades as its opposite. But genuine soul development humbles the ego. Real encounters with the self, real spiritual growth, real psychological maturity, these don't make you feel superior. They make you aware of how much you don't know, how much work remains, how much grace is required. The genuine spiritual person doesn't claim enlightenment. They remain perpetually aware of their own shadow, their own limitations, their own need for continued growth. 5. The proper relationship. Ego in service to self. So here's the crucial point. The ego is not the enemy. Jung did not advocate for ego destruction. The ego is necessary. It provides structure, boundaries, the capacity to function in the world, the ability to make choices, and maintain identity. But it must not rule. The healthiest psyche is not ego-less, that would be psychosis. The healthiest psyche is ego-aligned with the self. Think of it as a hierarchy of command. The ego should be the executive officer, not the captain. It implements the deeper wisdom of the self, rather than dictating terms to the soul. When the relationship is properly ordered, the ego becomes the servant of individuation, rather than its obstacle. It provides the necessary strength and structure for the self's unfolding. You need ego strength to set boundaries while integrating your compassionate nature. You need ego structure to maintain relationships while being honest about your needs. You need ego capacity to function in the world while honoring your soul's deeper calling. The problem isn't having an ego. The problem is ego inflation, when the ego thinks it's the totality, when it refuses to recognize anything beyond its control, when it prioritizes image over authenticity. And the solution isn't ego destruction. It's ego submission, the ego learning to serve something larger than itself, to recognize that it's part of a greater whole, to step down from absolute rule and become an instrument of the self. This is what Jung meant by the integration of the personality, not eliminating the ego, but properly ordering the psyche so that the ego serves wholeness rather than fighting it. 6. Reframing the conflict. Development, not dysfunction. So let's come back to where we started. The battle you feel inside. The conflict between what you want and what you need. Between who you've been and who you're becoming. Between maintaining stability and pursuing growth. Jung's radical reframe is this. The battle you feel inside is not a sign you are broken. It is a sign that growth is occurring. The ego resists. The soul insists. And this tension is not random chaos, it's developmental. When you feel pulled in different directions, when part of you wants to stay and part wants to leave, when you're caught between safety and authenticity, you're not confused. You're in process. The ego is doing its job, protecting your current identity, maintaining stability, and warning against risk. The self is doing its job, demanding growth, pushing toward wholeness, refusing to let you stagnate. And individuation is not about eliminating this conflict. It's not about reaching some peaceful state where there's no inner tension. It's about negotiating it consciously. It's about recognizing what's happening, understanding the different agendas at play, and making conscious choices about how to honor both the ego's need for structure and the self's demand for growth. And here's what Jung promised. The more aware you become of this dynamic, the less chaotic your inner life feels. Not because the conflict disappears, but because you recognize what it is. You stop experiencing it as random suffering and start seeing it as meaningful development. You recognize the conflict is not random, it is developmental. The anxiety isn't just anxiety, it's the ego sensing change. The dissatisfaction isn't just negative thinking, it's the self demanding more. The restlessness isn't just a lack of gratitude, it's the soul outgrowing its current container. So if you're feeling inner conflict right now, if you're experiencing the battle between different parts of yourself, if you're caught between what feels safe and what feels true, Jung would say, pay attention. This isn't dysfunction. This is the psyche doing exactly what it's supposed to do, growing, evolving, demanding wholeness. The ego's resistance is natural. Honor it, understand it, but don't let it dictate terms to your soul. The self's insistence is necessary. Listen to it, trust it, let it guide you toward becoming who you're meant to be. The battle between ego and soul is not something to be won or lost. It's something to be understood, negotiated, and ultimately integrated. Because the goal isn't the ego's victory or the ego's destruction. The goal is the ego learning to serve something larger than itself, your wholeness, your authenticity, your soul's deepest purpose. That's where the real peace lives. Not in eliminating conflict, but in understanding it. Not in choosing between ego and self, but in bringing them into right relationship. If this exploration of consciousness, inner conflict, and psychological development resonates with you, subscribe to Empire of the Mind. We're creating a community that explores the depths of the psyche with both rigor and reverence. Join us. Hit that subscribe button. The journey toward wholeness continues. Until next time, may you honor both your ego's need for structure and your soul's demand for growth, trusting that the battle within you is not chaos. It's transformation unfolding exactly as it should, because that's where individuation lives.